Hey guys, welcome back to Idea Drop. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Ed Rush, who has done many things from wrestling lions and shooting down MiGs. He is an ex-Marine fighter pilot who has way more business experience than Kendall and I combined, and so we should listen to that glut of information, and dude, this is a good conversation. You should stick around.
Did you just call him a glutton?
No, glut of information.
I like that intro, Dustin. You did a good job with that. That was good.
You said you wrestled lions. I mean, that's pretty damn cool.
For people who don't know, for really quick, so you were a Top Gun graduate, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we should mention.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, like, can you give us a little bit of the background? You're a fighter pilot for Top Gun. Like,
Yeah.
I just watched the new Tom Cruise one, Top Gun.
Movie, wasn't it?
I mean, Miramar, like, is my company name.
Yep.
So
really?
Yeah,
cool.
Miramar.co is a domain I just paid last year $5,000 for because it's a competitive name, but I can't get Miramar.com because some billion-dollar company's squatting on it. It just forwards to their boring manufacturing company. But we are like Miramar Air Force Base, Miramar Beach down there was the inspiration behind our company.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Come to San Diego. I'll get you on an aircraft carrier. We'll go for a little tour. Maybe
love
go.
that.
I could take you to the base on Miramar if you want to go to the base and see some of the airplanes and stuff. So, what was I? So I was using a fighter pilot analogy. So you have in an F-18, you take off with about 14,000 pounds of gas. Okay, so that's about 2,000 gallons, just to put it into sort of layman's terms. That gas will last you maybe an hour and a half, just flying around, kind of conserving gas. If you put it into full afterburner, it'll last about 4 minutes before you're out of gas, okay? Because afterburner is basically like dumping cans of gas into a fire, you know?
Wow.
Now, you can move an airplane really fast in afterburner, and in combat, there's reason to use it, especially if you're fighting or trying to go fast. So if I'm a junior fighter pilot who's just all emotion and spirit, but no brains, I could take off an afterburner, fly towards the target, fly past the target, come back home, do nothing, okay? Or you could take off, you could preserve, you could watch where the enemy's moving, you can wait for the time to strike, talk to your ground controller, boom, put it in an afterburner for 30 seconds, come in, dive the target, hit the target, and then have enough gas to come home, right? And that second one is a fabulous entrepreneur.
That's
the
right.
first one is the dude who's going to go broke and probably destroy his team in the process, right? And the reason for that is most entrepreneurs operate, by the way, in this full afterburner mode. Like I'm going to grind. I'm making it happen. Like working the work. Like it's almost like this, like the work is the purpose, not so much the result, right? And so if you look at your business more holistically, this is what I do with entrepreneurs that I work with. Take a big step back, look up at 30,000 feet, look at the activities that they're doing. And I'm not kidding you. Most people that sit down with me come in with about 100 things they're doing, and another 100 they feel guilty they're not doing, you know? And when they walk out of the room with me, they have minimum of two, maybe four things that are their focus. Because the truth is, there's only like one or two or three or four things that drive almost everything in your business.
That's right.
Now, identifying those can be challenging. Sometimes you need some data. Sometimes you need to understand sort of like the business model. You definitely need to understand the customer. But the idea is your job as an entrepreneur is to be like this, like in a space of perfect rest, waiting for the time to arrive when the target shows up, and then you put everything. Like this is when you sprint. Like one of my books is about sprinting. You don't sprint all the time. You sprint when the opportunity opens up, right? When you see that opportunity and the window opens, just like an F-18 fighting a MiG-29, I've got a story about that too. Once that window opens, and by the way, sometimes that window is a very short window, you put everything. That's when it's all hands on deck. Wake up early, go to bed late, travel, do what you need to do to hit the target, and then it's like back like this again, right?
Wow.
And that's real business. Like you can't sustain the kind of stuff that gets taught. Oh my goodness. From like the productivity people and the sales people, like you.
That's right. Yeah. Stop talking to me about optimizing for ops and productivity when that's not what drives revenue.
Right. And the point is like productivity for what? People like, I had a really, really productive day. You had a busy day. You had a really busy day. You didn't do shit. Okay, I'm sorry. The
I
second
am
time
so with you.
Man, Ed, you're
No,
like
this is the
speaking
good
my
stuff.
heart language now.
Now we're on to the entrepreneur talk. You're reminding me of Naval Ravikant. He's one of the most famous venture capitalists, and he's one of these people who I really appreciate his perspective on time leverage, right? So right now, maybe my time is worth $4,000 an hour, and maybe my job next year is to get that to $10,000. I want to keep upgrading every hour. So then I have to assess, is this call worth it, right? Why? And you have to answer honestly to yourself, why, if that's what your time is worth. But he says, at the end of the day, entrepreneurialism needs to come back to hunting like a lion. Lions are lazy as hell.
Yeah.
They rest after they eat in the sun, but they are so freaking opportunistic. They will come steal a meal from the hyenas. They will go bully their way into something. They will go take down a big animal that randomly walked across their path. And then they will eat for weeks off of this one big snack. And then they'll rest and do it again. And that is way more true. If I look at the successes in my life from a business perspective, they're all like that. And the failures are all the other one, where you're like day in, day out, you're like optimizing your day. I'm doing time blocking now. Now I'm trying to make sure I'm super efficient. I'm getting back, I'm at inbox 0. Oh, I've responded to all my Slack messages. That's how to be busy. That's not how to be productive.
Totally right. And so if you look at that, what you just described is an emotionally immature approach to business, right? So look, I have a 16-year-old son. There are things that I teach my entrepreneurs that I wouldn't teach my 16-year-old son, because what I'm trying to teach my 16-year-old son right now is a little discipline.
There's foundations.
Wake up, get your stuff done, have a good breakfast, do a little workout, get into school, that's what you teach a 16-year-old. By the time you grow into being an entrepreneur, the old, those are just the training wheels to get you onto the bike,
Yep.
But if you're going to start doing wheelies, there's going to be a little creative juice in there. There's going to be a little bit of that lion. You know what I mean? You're going to be voiced over by James Earl Jones and have, Rafiki giving you advice and stuff. So little dad thing there for you. So, but yeah. So now that you're emotionally mature, you're wise enough to be able to look. Remember, I talked about wisdom, right? At the top of the pyramid, and what AI can and can't do. When you're in that zone, you might spend 2 hours in the morning thinking. Literally, that might be your morning, 2 hours in the morning thinking, or praying, or whatever you're meditating, whatever your morning routine is. And you might get up and do the 2 emails that are going to create $2 million in your business 6 months from now. And you might go to lunch with your son and spend the afternoon, I'm going to spend the afternoon with my boy going on a bike ride, right? So that could be the afternoon. Now, if there's any guilt as an entrepreneur, if there's any guilt, I didn't really do much work today. Yeah, you did. You were very productive.
You got those 2 things you needed to strike.
You had a great day. But if there's any guilt there at all, it's because you're thinking like an emotionally immature entrepreneur, not like an emotionally mature entrepreneur.
Good. It's so good.
Is that fun?
It's hard to get that out of your brain, though. I mean, we are taught everywhere around us. Hustle culture is... it's as prevalent as the worst thing you could possibly imagine, especially within entrepreneurs. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting anomaly. What do you say to young entrepreneurs who don't have the ability or the luxury of that time? They are on a time crunch and they have to figure out a way, because they have to put food on the table and they have to, provide for normal life issues. Do you ever come across people like that in your business? Or
yeah. So again, sort of back to that, we talked about this a while ago, sometimes our desire is to put things into these perfect little boxes. Mm-hmm. And what I just said does not describe every single person who's an entrepreneur in every one stage of life, right? There are times when when you are straight up dialing it in and working it. And I will tell you, especially as a young entrepreneur, one of the most important things you can do is dedicate time to your learning and training, right? Number one, as an entrepreneur, you need to understand how to communicate effectively. That involves persuasion. Okay. And it involves being able to get someone to say yes. That's one of the most important, if not the most important things that you can do. It took me a lot of reading and studying and practicing and understanding the forms of human communication to be able to put ideas together properly. And especially because I'm a professional communicator, I had to practice that kind of stuff over and over and over and see how to do it. Right. The second thing I needed to understand is how to put people around me that could help do all those other things that I wasn't very good at, right? So we would call that team building. That process, you don't find the right person the first time often, you know? Sometimes that could take 2 or 3 years to really start to build that team that's around you. So there's like time in that process. So yeah, I just said you might do 2 emails. And the young entrepreneur is like, well, Ed, I'm doing all my customer service stuff. Like, remember when I told you about that service company I had where I'm like looking at all the emails and stuff like that? Well, it took time and money to put someone in place who was qualified and trained, and like all that took more work, right? I was doing all the work, I was doing all the customer service stuff, I was doing all the sales stuff and most of the delivery stuff. And I'm dealing with all these other team members who are building websites and stuff. Well, if I bring someone on board, I'm going to actually do more because I got to train her on how to do this and observe and supervise and all that other stuff. And then I get to work less. And so if you're in that stage, dial it in, be as efficient as possible, but work to the place where you can start to outsource those things that you don't like to do or you're not like passionate about, so that you can begin to create the kind of lifestyle where you can use your brain to make money. So yeah, it's just like that process.
Man, Ed, this is good advice. I can tell you spent a lot of time learning this and talking to a lot of people. I want to ask you a question. What do you see as bad advice that is very often given to entrepreneurs when they're starting down their journey or further down the road? I know you just covered one, but is there anything else that you see most commonly happening?
Boy, this is such a good question because first of all, there's a lot. And second, most advice is bad advice. So like the challenge.
Dude, I love that. That's great.
The challenge of following, oh man, I don't even know if I should say this. So the challenge of following like thought leaders or speakers, authors, coaches and stuff on Instagram is just about everyone who's writing a book or speaking on a topic essentially has just written that book to themselves. Okay. So what you can guarantee is that whatever they're teaching you as an expert, they have just gone through the process of learning that thing themselves. I'll give you an example. So I just wrote this book called God Talks. And in one of the chapters, I'm speaking to the person reading the book and I'm saying, you know, one of the biggest lies we can believe as an entrepreneur is that we missed out or that we're too late or that, you know, we're always behind, which is basically is what most entrepreneurs believe all the time. We're behind, I'm behind, you know, which is total lie, right? It's just total baloney. Behind according to who? You know? So one day I was talking to this person I work with, like who's like my coach, you know, and I was like, you know, gosh, I just feel like, you know, I'm a little behind. I'm studying this stuff, right? She literally takes a picture of a page in my book. That's all she did. Texted it to me, and I was like, yeah, I kind of wrote that book to me, right? So all that is to say, the challenge in listening and following someone is they're almost always giving you their best stuff. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times they're going to be honest. Like I was just honest with you about, I mean, not honest the whole time, but like transparent about some of the things that are going on behind the process. But a lot of times we get the idea that like, oh my gosh, I mean, I read Naval's book and I'm like Elon Musk and I'm reading all these like, you know, Peter Thiel and like all these like guys, oh my gosh, like, and what you're reading and hearing is their best stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, not
like
their worst stuff.
You didn't catch them Saturday morning at 7 after a big night. You know, they're not doing great. You know what I'm saying? You're getting their like best stuff. And so the first thing when it comes to like advice is just to understand like basically every piece of advice is bad advice unless it's specifically targeted to you and taken in the context of your life, you know? So we were talking a little bit about in the beginning of our discussion about marriages and relationships. And I was just saying like, you know, most entrepreneurs I know have a very challenged relationship because they're so different than their spouse. Well, that's true generally. Might not be true for you. Remember I said there's 3 couples that did it right? Maybe you're that person. Maybe you're the person who's like totally aligned and like perfectly connected to do business together. And so if I'm giving some general advice, maybe that's not specific advice for you. So it should be read right
so
specifically.
I've been trying to tackle, I believe what you're saying so passionately. I've bet our whole business model on it. So like I've seriously
giving bad
am
advice.
So frustrated by bad advice or another way to say it is just non-contextual advice that I can't really bring myself to talk to any coaches or talk to any even outside consultants unless I have the time to catch them fully up on the situation.
Yeah.
I can't sit down for an hour and do the normal coaching thing and feel like I can leave that with good decisions. Now, I know there are tools and methods to do that with coaching. That's great. I've had those. I do like that, but it's not enough. I need more care than that. And so what I do, like, we can't dump this stuff on our wives. I can't dump this stuff on Dustin, and I can't go to my team and expect them to carry the load that I need to carry. Like, that's my job, is to carry the load that they're not having to carry. They have to do their job. I have to do mine. And when you're employing people, there's a power differential just naturally built in. So as much as I want a good relationship with them, it's not a fully honest relationship, because it's not a covenant of, it's not like marriage. It's not 50-50. I can fire them and they can't fire me. Yeah. And that's not fair. So if I want the best advice, I have to go to a peer. And so the thing that I've been doing, I think Eamon said that you do some mastermind stuff. I'd love to know more about that. But like, I'm like, man, it's a digital era. I'm going to make a freaking digital community of people building 7 and 8 figure businesses that connect with each other. Because it's super scalable, right? So it's a high trust way to make our business network bigger. B, I actually believe in that model. If they get on Zoom together and they work out a problem for each other, because that's what I do with my business friends, like, that's actually how I can navigate life and have the emotional sustainability to go through hard seasons and pressure points and hunt like a lion or a fighter jet. Like, I actually believe in the community model. That community doesn't mean we all have to have pieces of each other's companies. It doesn't mean we have to slice pie all the time. It literally is paying it forward. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to hear you out. I'm going to think about your situation. I'm going to pull from my experiences, and then you're going to do the same for me. And I just really think the more and more we do remote and digital business, the more isolation comes up. And this thing is at the heart of what it's going to take to have a good, healthy business moving forward.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, I mean, you have essentially what you just described there. So there's a reason I don't call myself a coach, because a coach is someone you meet at Starbucks who you pay $25 an hour to keep you accountable to like your goals or whatever.
Right.
You know, it's like, I don't even do that. By the way, I none of the things that I don't write goals. I don't write like, my daily sort of like top 10 or whatever. None of that. You live life organically. You know what your mission is. You just get up and you just accomplish your mission. But yeah, that's the reason why I call myself an advisor, because what the kind of advice you don't need 10 hours of like coaching or whatever. What you need is someone to understand your situation and go, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Delegate that. Hire someone to do that, and that. Your job is to do that.
And you have to trust that person in order to give them that seat in your life.
Yeah. And yeah, totally right. And they need to be able to, this is real advice. Okay. So when I talk to my clients, the folks that I work with, I tell them I'm going to give you 3 kinds of advice. Kind number 1, 5% of the time I will say, try it. If I say try it, it means I don't know if it's going to work. Let's give it a shot. 50% of the time I'm going to say, here's what I suggest. If I say, here's what I suggest, what it means is this has worked for me in my business, or it's worked for someone else that I've worked with. I'm not sure it'll work in your context, but I do know it works in the real world, right?
Yep.
And 45% of the time, so 5% is sort of try it, 50% is here's what I suggest, and 45% of the time it is me looking you in the eye and saying, do this. This will work.
Trust me.
When I say, do this will work. The people that I work with pay me from anywhere from $25,000 all the way up to $125,000 a year for me to give them advice, right? When I say, do this will work, I'm risking my professional reputation, and I'm laying it on the line. That's right. And I'm saying, look, if this doesn't work, you don't even need to pay me, because like I should be paying you for the wasting of your time. And I will tell you, since I started doing do this will work about 5 or 6 years ago, I haven't had a single time where when I looked them in the eye and told them, because I know in the core of my being, this will. And by the way, sometimes you need someone to look you in the eye and say, do this. This will work. Because most entrepreneurs live in this cloud of uncertainty. You think this is a good idea. You're not sure if it's a good idea. I mean, you heard this idea on a podcast last week, so it probably should work. Right. And sometimes what you need is someone to straight up, put their stuff on the line and say, look, do this, this will work. And that, in my opinion, is what distinguishes like someone who really knows what they're doing in this world from everyone else who calls themselves a coach or a consultant or whatever. That's the line right there. And there's very few people that can do that. But when you can, like, you can see magnitude changes. I'm not talking about like doubling a business. I'm talking about like someone going from like $1 to $20 million.
Yeah, right.
Because of that focus.
Dude, that's a really courageous thing. You're like essentially holding their insecurity. Like they're thinking of, I want to do this and I want somebody to give me permission. And you're just saying, hey, knock down the damn door. You already know how to do what you need to do. Go and do it. And you're actually like holding all of their anxiety in that moment. I'm impressed. That's bold. That's a pretty bold approach. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong about how you're doing it, but that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you start to learn entrepreneurs, right? So we look really confident, but when it comes down to the day-to-day decisions, like we were talking about earlier in the thing, where the guy was like, I believe, help my unbelief. An entrepreneur is a person who in one moment is like, this is the way, follow me. And in the back of their mind, they're like, is this really the way? I'm not totally sure about it. This is the right thing, And so it is helpful to have somebody right next to you who's like, dude, this is the way. Like, I didn't mean to quote Star Wars with my Star Wars shirt.
This is the way.
Like,
yeah.
No, it's great. We're all good about that. Yeah.
We like it.
Just follow this, because what happens is you get into you implement an idea. When you implement an idea, it either works immediately, it doesn't work at all, or it kind of works. And almost every business idea, when first implemented, kind of works. You need to adjust the message. You need to adjust the product a little bit. You need to start to communicate to a different market. You need to try a different advertising medium. Like there's always these little adjustments. And so when you do it at first and it kind of works, your mind's like, is this really the way? Having someone next to you is like, dude, this is the way. Okay. Like, let's keep moving. You will find, this market will find you and you will find this market. Like when you know that, you can persist in all of those adjustments. And frankly, most entrepreneurs are guilty of like going in a direction and then stopping and then going in another direction and then stopping and going in another direction. And what happens is you start planning all this money in your future banking. When you go to this direction, you start putting money in your future bank account. You're going to get it 4 or 5, 6 months from now because you've created the actions that are going to create that revenue. But you get like a month or two into it and you start doubting yourself and you go,
you don't finish the job.
I'll try this one. You try this one. You start putting money in your future bank account and then you move away from it and all that money just disintegrates and dissolves. And so that's why sometimes you do need someone beside you to be like, keep going.
That's right.
You're like, I'm looking at your actions and your actions are money creating actions. I know that hasn't showed up yet, right? Like, for example, we're doing a podcast now. I don't know when it'll be released. 2 weeks, a month from now, whatever.
Next week. No.
Next week.
We're fast around here. Come on.
But think about this for a second. Okay. So let's say theoretically, down the road, someone listens to this amazing show and signs up to work with you, or, Kendall, or you, Dustin, or me down the road. Okay. So let's say it's like a month or two down the road. Let's say they come to one of my events. We get to know each other. And a year after that, they're like, hey, Ed, I want some help in my business. And they bring me in and pay me. Right.
Yep.
Well, this interview that we scheduled about 2 or 3 weeks ago that we're recording now, that's being released a week from now, that the person might show up for my event 6 months from now, that might hire me a year from now. This interview that we're doing right now put a certain amount of money into my future bank, right? But if I decided, forget it, I'm not going to be an advisor anymore, I'm going to do this new business or whatever.
3 months from now, if you bail and go do a different business, you lost the seed. It's seed versus bread, right? You don't eat seed. You plant it in the freaking ground.
Dude.
You also don't plant bread, right? You don't plant bread and expect it to grow. You eat it. So you have to know which one's which. And I think the entrepreneurial life is so about sustainability and staying power that you have to be able to differentiate between I need to make this money now and bring it in and live off that. And I have to expect that thing I put in the ground, if watered and nurtured, will bear fruit later. And I got to be around to do the harvest. If I bail before I'm there for the harvest, then how can I ever get multiples? People are so stuck in linear thinking, they don't expect compounding. And so I'm maybe I'm a little too heady for most people, but like, I feel like you're just ignoring how life works if you don't actually believe in compounding. Everything around us compounds. The only things that don't die early.
Yeah, good. That's really good. And by the way, I was just looking at my book because I have on page 148 of the book that I mentioned is a whole discussion of what I call the fruit and seed block. It's what we're just talking about, bread and seed, but in a little bit of a different way. So there's an equal and opposite mistake, which is persisting in a bad idea, right? So I've had clients of mine who I said, and by the way, there's people who I've said this to, where I said, look, this idea is not going to work the way you want it to. It's just not. It's a great product. It's just the market's not going to respond the way you want to, and there's not really much we can do to fix that. And I've had people go, yeah, but persistence is important. I'm like, not in this, it's not. You got to persist in the right thing. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're heading in a direction, like for example, if you take off in an airplane, like an F-18, and you're heading towards the target, but you're 1 degree off. Well,
persistence is bad in that scenario.
Yeah, over a mile in 1 degree, you'll still be able to see the target. Over 600 miles, which is about the distance we would go in a normal strike mission.
Yep.
Over 600 miles, if you go 1 degree off, you're 10 miles off.
Wow.
10 miles. You're nowhere near.
Wow.
Nowhere near the target, right? And so sometimes, and a lot of entrepreneurs are like 90 degrees off. So if you have someone like me that goes, you're off. You're just off. It's okay. We're going to adjust to your market. We're going to adjust your message. We're going to adjust your product. We're going to adjust, like I had a client who had a product on how to avoid type 2 diabetes. Okay. And he sold none of those because nobody signs up for that. I wouldn't buy that.
No, because they don't have it yet. Right now they're addicted to sugar. Yeah.
So what we did was we changed the title to How to Overcome Your Type 2 Diabetes. It was the same product. We just changed the name. Different market. Just a different market. Same message. Different market. Yeah, it sold great. Of course, because the moment someone has diagnosed with type 2, they go to the Google machine and they're like, how do I, right? So if you're there at that moment, the moment that they're like most interested, you're going to be very successful. My point is, if I said to him, hey, by the way, this product is not going to work. If he had said, yeah, but I watched this podcast about this guy who said, he was this, Navy SEAL.
Persistence would have killed him right there.
Here's this Navy SEAL who, he was in combat and he had to struggle to survive. And, I was taught that persistence and consistency create champions. And they don't. You could persist in a dumb idea and it's still a dumb idea a year from now, right? So sometimes you need to not persist.
You're talking about decision making at the right points in time. They're so high leverage, and I think great entrepreneurs have this knack for regularly making decisions that are high leverage. So that same decision could have been done by that same guy 3 months earlier. And if we looked at his bank account right now based on that product, we could actually do the math on the revenue he missed out by not making that decision 3 months earlier. So you can just very easily look at these slight tweaks in your business and know you're losing money, you're losing opportunity. Maybe you're risking the business or your family. It's just hard to know. It's hard to stop, I think, the busyness conversation that we had earlier. It's hard to stop long enough to go, which decisions am I just taking for granted right now and I'm not making? And then at the same time, there's a tension. This is also why we blame entrepreneurs for moving on too early. They're making decisions too macro too often.
Or just overcoming the cognitive blindness that comes with the typical inability to see yourself and your own stuff.
That's so real.
I mean,
guilt, shame.
I've trained myself at least for the last 5 years to try to be zero cognitive blindness about my own stuff. And I can tell you in full disclosure, I may not even be 50% of the way. Like, I still need good advice.
That's right.
And team members I can trust.
That's right.
And like our friend, Eamon.
Eamon,
Ross,
he's sitting over here.
Who introduced us, right?
Yeah.
who is the kind of person who will in a good way stab you to your face. He had someone tell him that. But you really need someone who can just say, hey, look, I don't think this is good. And for you to be okay, like ego wise, to be like, yeah, that's right. We're going to work on that together. You know,
I mean,
dude, that's one of the biggest things I see in corporations is people who are at high levels of leadership. If they're not smart, they hire somebody who agrees with them.
Oh my gosh.
That's dangerous.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
So
we could
dangerous.
talk all day on that.
I mean, that person needs to follow your orders. You know, you tell them what to do. They're going to do what they do. But if you can't have somebody around you who says, hey, I'm calling bullshit on your idea, then you're setting yourself up for failure because you are lying to yourself 100% of the, not 100% of the time, but you will. It's just going to happen. It's natural. And it's not even a bad thing. Like, you just see things that the people around you will see differently, and you need to have that input. Otherwise, you're just destined to be, 10 miles off the target is what you said?
I mean, when you're practicing judgment, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you're going to keep doing business for the next 30 years, you're really honing in this skill of judgment, right? There's this mix of intellect, experience, wisdom, and it comes down into a decision point. That's judgment calls. You were saying this is the way. Sometimes you just have to look somebody in the eyes and tell them this is what you need to do. Mm-hmm. Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, he goes to George Lucas and they're attending a award ceremony together. He gets a seat next to him, and he needs to convince George Lucas to sell him the rights to Star Wars, sell Disney the rights to Star Wars, right? And it was a hard no. It was just a cold, flat no. But because Bob Iger, to get his CEO job, in order to get the job, he had gone internally, basically on a political campaign, and say, we need to buy Marvel, we need to buy Star Wars, we need to buy Pixar. This is how we're going to turn around the business because we are in the IP entertainment business, and we no longer have the best IP. We are being beaten. Lion King was great for its era. And before that, Walt Disney, Mickey Mouse, we did great IP. We are not a theme park business. We are an IP business. Yeah. So we must spend whatever it takes. Now, to the CFOs out there, they're like, we can't afford Pixar. We can't afford Star Wars. We'll never win those negotiations. But Bob Iger knew, he had the judgment, he had the practiced lifelong wisdom to know, no, this is what we need to do in order to let Disney run for another 100 years. Mm-hmm. So he went out to those negotiations and he just handled it himself. And he convinced those people, you need a better caretaker of your legacy. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, 3 or 4 conversations later with George Lucas, who else, when you go, is going to care for your legacy? There's no one else but Disney who can handle that at a distribution scale, storytelling, ongoing curation of content. And that's how he won it, not with money. Yes, it was an expensive multi-billion, I think it was $7 billion or something. But like those judgment calls, those moments where that's hunting like a lion, that's like going after the one thing. Think of all the busyness the CEO of Disney could have done those weeks. Instead, he booked that one seat next to George Lucas and said, I need to do this and you need to do this. Let's go.
That's it right there. Remember I said there's like 1 or 2 or 3 things, 4 things per year. That was it.
That was it
that
for them.
Dinner. Yeah. Like the board's like, so what did you do this year? He's like,
for my $130 million salary, thank you. Dinner. I got you Pixar.
Got some steak.
That's it. I just went to that dinner. I'm good. What did you do the rest of the time? I just play golf and stuff.
Yeah.
So it would have been worth it. By the way, that's how we value.
Oh yeah.
That's how screwed up we are sometimes at valuing people's input, effort. If he had just said, I just did that. Oh, great. Yeah. Thank you. Good job this year.
Honestly, this is why I'm pretty bullish on AI as a technology, because it creates a world where our humanity will be higher and higher leverage. Judgment and wisdom will be at the forefront of what it means to live a healthy, well life.
Good.
Because technology has this pattern where it once it's released, once it's out of Pandora's box, the cost drives down to zero. Solar captures energy for free from the sun. The cost is how much did it cost to install and hook up the distribution lines to make this happen? And how much did it cost to make the solar cells? Well, we already have the robots that make solar cells, and we already know how to mine the material out of the earth. So now it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper unless we screw up in politics, which is a whole different episode.
Yeah, you're right.
But Literally, tech goes to zero or almost approaches zero after its release. That's what happens. Humans now have more relative wealth. We can complain as much as we want about how things are, inflation is killing us. But the truth is, I can get on an airplane and go to New York for the cost of what, 50 years ago would have been devastating to a family. Technology is going to zero on cost. So with AI's release, the average person, if we democratize it, and as we democratize AI, will be able to go, I need to invest more in judgment calls than I do in busyness, because this thing will help me get whatever I want to get done. But I need to actually have the right thing in mind of what I want to get accomplished, or I'm squandering my life.
Yeah. That's good, man.
That's interesting.
This is fun.
Ed, what are you working on right now? I'm curious.
Oh, good. Thank you for that question. So I just wrote this book. I think I mentioned it a couple of times, called God Talks. I got it sitting right here in front of me. Essentially, it's a guide. I wrote it for entrepreneurs. Essentially, it's a guide to tap into divine wisdom, ask God questions about your business, and get answers. And the bridge on the book that really makes it unique. There's a lot of people that talk about the spiritual stuff. There's a lot of people that talk about the neuropsychology, which is essentially training your brain. This is really the only book that brings the two together. So I teach you how to have a conversation with God, get answers, and then use those answers to retrain your brain for success. And I'll just say, full disclosure, it really works for anyone. I've had Christian folks use it, but I've also had atheists and agnostics and Hindus,
really?
Buddhists, and
Wow.
Chapter 4 in the book is a story about how an atheist came to one of my events and had a conversation with God, and it totally changed her life. It changed her business too. Her story was unbelievably tragic. Grew up in a really abusive situation. Decided there was no heavenly father because her earthly father was such a jerk. And 40 years later, after telling no one about her upbringing or anything, she walks into one of my business events. I'm doing an exercise where I'm teaching entrepreneurs to have a conversation with God. She wants to run out of the door, but she sat down, and next thing you know, God starts speaking to her. It's an unbelievable story. But yeah, so I teach people how to have that connection to divine wisdom. It is the strategic advantage in business if you so choose to tap into it. It brings a lot of peace. It can bring an unbelievable amount of prosperity. Yeah, so my goal is to build to really share this message with as many people as possible. So I do events. So every 2 months, I do an event called God Talks Live, where I bring entrepreneurs together for 2 days. We immerse ourselves in an environment with business, teaching, coaching, but also where I'm leading them in exercises where they're journaling answers about their purpose, about their business, about money, about what barriers and blocks may be in the way to attracting wealth, those sort of things. And my goal is to start doing these events in stadiums, 20, 70,000 person stadiums, and then eventually move into Washington, D.C., do an event on the mall in D.C. where entrepreneurs are there connecting with God, asking questions. Because the truth is, if the world's going to change, and clearly the world does need to change, it's going to be entrepreneurs who are going to do it in every aspect, every area of life, arts, media, culture, education, everything. It's going to be you listening and watching this show right now who are going to make the change. So my vision is to create a movement that's so big that we literally just take over the world's governments.
Through creation.
Entrepreneurially.
Yeah.
Peacefully.
We create, yeah.
But entrepreneurially, because, we live, so I love the Constitution. I think it's a brilliant document. However, we do live in a world that's moving 400,000 times faster than it was in 1776. And so we need a government that's able to iterate and make decisions faster than they did back then.
Right.
That's not to say they need to make decisions every moment, but they do need to think more entrepreneurially. And because we have poorly trained people in Washington with very little ethic, they're making really bad decisions that are affecting the world in a really bad way and slowing down the ability for us to make positive change. And so my job is just to fire all of them, frankly, peacefully, and using the system that is existing, and help usher in a new era of good, spiritually minded entrepreneurs who really have a vision to change the world and do it well. And eventually we'll take over our country in a peaceful way. I keep saying that. And eventually we'll take over the world, and we'll do what we've always been.
As a Navy pilot, you have to keep saying, peacefully.
Peacefully, yeah. And especially after like all of the, there's a lot of rhetoric about like, but what I simply mean is like when I say peacefully, like what we're doing right now, in the last hour and a half, we've shared a lot of ideas. As someone's listening, your mind starts to begin to change, right? You're seeing things in a different way. And that's a really good thing for your brain. That's a really good thing for your business. That's a really good thing for the world. And we've done this very peacefully. And really the beginning of cultural transformation is mind transformation. You metamorphosize the way you think, which creates a new set of actions, which creates a new set of results. And you can do that individually. You can do that as a company. You can do that as a state and a nation and a world. Okay. So all of the principles work on the macro as much as they work on the micro. And part of my vision is to like build this army of entrepreneurs, like a peaceful army of entrepreneurs who want to take these ideas and shift the world with these ideas. And we're not far off. I'm talking about like, people think it takes 40 years. It could take 40 weeks to do something like this when you get enough movement. So that's my short answer, Dustin, to your question.
That's awesome.
what I'm doing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great short answer. I like that. Where do people find you? I'm curious if they want to
So the easiest way
movement that you're starting.
Easiest place to go is godtalks.com. That's really where this whole movement is started.
Hey, that's a good domain.
I know. I actually I couldn't believe I bought it for the same price you bought that other domain.
Yeah. I
couldn't believe it was available. That was God's way of God reserved that domain for me. It had His name on it, so I think He had some sort of trademarked IP on that. And I reached out and bought it for $5,000. I couldn't believe it. So so godtalks.com. You can get the book. I have a series of recorded audios that you can download. And what I'll tell you is anyone who listens to Idea Drop, and by the way, you got to the end of this interview. This was not a short interview. And so to honor you for getting to the end of the interview, I'm going to do something. Just don't publish this publicly. Okay. I'm going to do something for the implementer who got to the end. Because by the way, if you look at the numbers, not that many people get to the end. They do the beginning and the middle. And so since you got to the end, if you want to come to any of my events, you're welcome to come as my guest. You don't have to pay me a dime. You can bring a guest with you. It's my way to honor your entrepreneurial spirit, to invest in you. And to access that, just email me. So my email is coaching, COACHING @edrush.com. You can just remember coaching and then my name, coaching @edrush. Just tell me that you heard me on Idea Drop or saw the interview, and I'll connect.
That's awesome.
I will reply to you. By the way, that is my email. That doesn't go to a team member or anything. I will connect you with a team member who's going to be able to. We can interact a little bit. I'll connect you with a team member who will register you for the event, and I'd love to meet you personally, see how I can invest intellectually in your business and help you out as well.
You're a smart marketer. It's hard to build trust with people and then also be able to offer them a clear path to working with you. Like that's how did you go from Navy pilot to that skill set? That's
I'm curious
crazy.
about that as well.
So the short version of that story is, so I got out of the military. I was in the Marines, but we're part of the Department of the Navy, so it might as well be similar. But when I got out, none of the airlines were hiring. So I just started creating products. Like it was back in 2006, 2007 when the internet was sort of like Wild West.
Sure. Yeah.
Started doing AdWords. Next thing you know, the businesses are six-figure businesses.
You learned the funnels in those early days.
And I just learned I learned how to copyright, learn communication, learn how to write little ads, long ads, short ads, big ads.
Yep.
Learned what works, split testing, landing pages, ads, like the old school, like real marketing, like Claude Hopkins, 1927 kind of marketing, right? Scientific advertising. And then those businesses got really successful. I started building and selling other companies. I created those 2 service companies that we had mentioned, moved into 7-figure range a few years into my entrepreneurial journey. And then what happened was I had some folks that started inviting me to their business events. And I would do like a 30-minute hour talk. I didn't know what I was doing. All I would do is just tell people what I was doing. Here are the websites I'm using. Like, this is how I'm split testing pages, and this is what's working, and this background works. And all of a sudden, people started coming up to me and asking if I could help them in their business. And I was like, okay. And they would be like, how much does that cost? And I'm like, you can just buy lunch if you want. I didn't have any idea like how to do that.
Yep.
And then eventually I started charging $2,500, then $5,000, then $10,000. Then people started flying in to come see me. And then it was 15, and then it was 20,000, it was 25. Like I told you, I've done up to $125,000 for a year consulting, advising. And then I started figuring out like, my initial consulting was like, I was giving people a lot of work because a young consultant doesn't know any better. So like, if you ever work with a coach or consultant, you feel like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. You should never feel like you have so much to do after you talk to the person.
No, they're not your project manager.
Yeah, you should feel lighter, So I started realizing, oh man, there's a faster, easier way to do this. And when I clicked that into place, that was probably after about 150, 200 clients. Like I said, I've had almost 600 by now. Man, they started getting successful really fast. And what I do now is write books, speak, share a message, do events, take a lot of time off, go fly fishing.
Raise your kids. Hey, I got some fly rods. I live on a fishing pond. So yeah, we got bass in there. I watched an osprey catch a bass this week.
Oh, that's awesome.
Off my back deck. Yeah, it's really nice to meet you. This has been great.
Ed, I want to say, man, I'm really impressed by what you're saying. I think you have really good insight. One of the most interesting things about you, though, is you actually seem genuinely happy, and you're giving away good advice while being a happy person, and that says something about your internal world and what you got going on there. So I appreciate.
Thank you for observing that, Dustin. Isn't that the tell? So like you have a leadership coach who whose employees hate him. You're like, or like the investing guy who's broke, like the investing guy trainer who's broke or whatever. So yeah, it should look like the thing should look like it is. So yeah, I am happy. Life's great, and even if it's not, there's good reason to be happy. So that's cool, guys. Thank you.
Yes.
That's awesome.